open. Cafeteria itself is really empty as well, so hopefully it means that people are not ill, but just diligently studying for upcoming exams. So today, we're going to have more of an informal type of talk, so no like super heavy research, things like that. But we have, I heard that.
That's encouraging thing.
But we have one of the best talk speakers to come and talk to us today. This is someone who was a biology major here at Houghton, but is not doing anything related, really, in terms of the biological sciences. So if you're like, I don't necessarily want to become a medical doctor. I don't want to go into research. I don't want to teach. What am I supposed to do with my life? Here's an opportunity to hear from somebody who might be able to give you some tips and insiders to think about what are the other options that could be there for you. Ways to be able to think about your career beyond the traditional pathways and be able to use the skill sets that you have and that God has given. So I'm going to turn it over, quickly give a word of prayer. We only have 2 more colloquiums left at this semester, so please join us after Thanksgiving for 2 more talks. We'll do a quick word of prayer, and then we're going to turn it over to Brett. By the way, thanks for this day. Thank you for the students who have come to be able to gather together to hear from our speaker today. Give the speaker calm reassurance of the words that he wants to be able to share with us, and that we can open our minds to be able to hear what you want to reveal to us. Give us the perseverance to be able to push through these last couple of days before we have Thanksgiving break, and to be able to push through when we come back. And remembering that the reason that we are here is because we have the opportunity to learn about your creation in light of who you are. We thank you for all of these things. Amen. So this is Brett Ruthberg.
Just right? Ruthberg.
Ruthberg, no R there, so Ruthberg. I won't say what year he graduated. It is on the poster if you want to go back and look at it. But, we're not going to do that. And so he's going to talk to us a little bit about his life pathway to kind of give you a perspective of where you may see yourself in 10 years after graduating from Houghton.
No, thank you very much, and thank you guys for sharing your lunch with me. Class of '97, which for me doesn't sound that far ago, but I have 2 children who are college graduates, so I get I'm the old guy in the room. So came to Houghton 1993. I'll get into it a little bit more, but 17 years old, right? I'm going to be a doctor, right? Because we'll go to the reasons why, but let's just say it wasn't a robust list of good reasons why. It was, hey, I want to be successful, and be respected, and it's what smart kids do, right? I thought of myself as a smart kid. Now, the journey from there has been really interesting. I would say your journeys are going to be really interesting too, whatever the path it is that you're going to be on. What I will say is, you've got a great base, right? Not just probably before Houghton, but say with Houghton, your education, your friendships, your relationship, your spiritual confidence, all of those things. That's going to prepare you for all the twists and the turns as you go forward. Okay, you're gonna be fun. All right, you're some of the best and the brightest out there. You're gonna be fun. Your basement's gonna be really okay. You're gonna pay your bills. You're gonna be able to raise a family. You're gonna do those things. It's just the question of what do you want out of your life? Who do you want to be? As you go forward, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So, like I said, not a lot of heavy research, not any scanning electron microscope slides or anything like that up here. It's going to be much more about thinking about you and your life and your career. I'll share some of my journey, and maybe that'll resonate with you a bit. The reality is it may not resonate with you for 5 years or until you're in the full flow of human life. So. I'm Brett, my wife Lisa's in the back. We've been married for 24 years. We've got 2 kids. Hannah went to Ball State. She was a gymnast, and now she's at UNC Law as a 1L, and the most stressed person that I know in my life, by far. Interesting journey there. My son Nolan, he graduated from West Virginia. He's up in New Jersey doing chemical sales. So we had a connection from my connections, and now he's working up there. I've been 25 years in the petrochemical industry. I'll explain what that means in a little bit. And for the last 3 years, I've been the Chief Supply Chain Officer at Highline Warren. I'm sure none of you know what that means, because I didn't know what it meant when I was in college. So basically, I run all of operations, research development, planning, and procurement for a $2 billion automotive aftermarket company that's into chemicals and motor oil and things like that. And environmentalists in here, just curious, anybody environmentalist things? So motor oils may sound like a very bad thing. It's actually one of the most recycled things in the world, more than plastic, more than glass, more than anything else. So my company is actually the largest buyer of recycled oil in North America. So not much of that makes it into the waste stream, which makes me feel a little bit good about that. My journey. So I came here, like I said, 17, absolutely convinced that I was going to be a medical doctor. All I knew about being a doctor was what I saw on TV, and I knew a guy, and sometimes I went to the doctor's office when I was 17. It just seemed like the right path for, it seemed like the right path for someone with solid intelligence, and reality was I probably wanted it for all the peripheral reasons versus kind of the reality of helping people, right? I wanted to be respected, I wanted a job that was meaningful, and probably wanted to make a lot of money, right? These were all, what I was more interested in than actually doing. That being said, when I got here, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later, I wasn't committed to the journey, right? At 17, even though there's great boundaries here, great, structure and things like that, the distractions were significant, right? I'd much rather be in the gym playing pickup ball, much rather be socializing with friends, seeing whatever else was out there, certainly that first year versus spending time in the lab, right? I had no idea the level of work commitment that being a science major required. And if you guys knew it before you got here, I mean, kudos for being prepared on that. But normal students, they spend a couple hours a week. We've got 3 labs, right? We had a lot of time where it's like, that 4-credit class, not 4 credits, it's like 8 credits. And, I was prepared to come to college and have fun, right? So that first year was, let's just say, eye-opening. So I'm guessing many of you went through a similar experience. So thankfully I had my scholarship, that was skin of my teeth. And we'll credit a number of really smart friends that I had that helped me study up for those finals that first year. Then I got my act together a little bit more in my second year. What I will say is I never once kind of skipped a different slot. Look at that. Sorry. We'll get into the journey a little bit more. So, left Houghton, needless to say, did not become a doctor, right? Between sophomore and junior year, I actually went and worked with a doctor. Amazing OBGYN surgeon in Columbus, Ohio. Spent 2 weeks with him. It was a phenomenal experience. But what I came out with is what makes him great at his job is nothing that I'm actually good at, right? It was an ability to do 300 tasks perfectly, as quickly as possible, with just ridiculous level of focus. And what I realized as I'm watching him do this incredible work is I'm not wired that way, right? This is not for me. And I made a decision 2 years before to pursue a career path, which I knew nothing about, okay? Now, what I didn't do, and what I would encourage you to think about is, A, whatever career path you're thinking about, it's not fair to have to pick a job at 17 or 18 years old, right? Because you don't know anything about it. Go out, take the initiative, get with professionals, find out what they actually do every day, find out what they love, find out what they hate about those jobs. Because when I came in, I knew there was doctors and lawyers and business people and like firemen and teachers. There was only 5 jobs in the whole world when I came in. There are thousands of different things. And the cool thing for this group is you've got the intelligence to do most of them. And that's a luxury. Not everybody has the horsepower to do a whole bunch of different things. You guys have clear focus, that's great. You may end up doing what you're planning to do, but I would wager, I hate 30%. 60% of you won't. And that's not a bad thing. You're going to be successful whatever you pick because you've got the work ethic and the intelligence. Needless to say, I did not become a doctor, right? I was not relatively serious student at various times. But once I decided I wasn't going to be a doctor, I didn't change my major, right? I figured I'm 2 years into this. I enjoy parts of biology. Let's get through this and we'll figure it out, right? Right or wrong, for me, that was the decision I made. And it actually ended up being a really good decision because my education, the background I have, both in chemistry and biology, and physics, I've taken that base knowledge and been able to really understand the industries that I've accidentally become part of over the last 25 years. So we'll talk about that, but to me that was one of the key learnings was just because I realized I wasn't going to be a doctor doesn't mean my education wasn't incredibly valuable in the career path I chose. Okay. There's a little bit about my journey here. Left Houghton, no skills, right? A lot of knowledge, no skills. This is not a vocational school, right? You don't, yes, you can, you can put the petri dish, you can do the inoculations, my basic skill in my first job was the ability to titrate. So I tested soap in a soap factory. And in my summers, I was not shadowing professionals, I was lifeguarding, right? Just the level of internships and things available, take advantage of that stuff. Library is great, right? But I wasn't serious about figuring out what I wanted to be. I wanted to have fun in the summer because labs are hard, and I wanted to be in the summer, right? That's not a bad choice. It just probably wasn't additive to finding the right career and the right path. So I came out of Houghton, I finished lifeguarding, my parents moved to Cleveland, and the most important thing to me was not to move to Cleveland. Okay? So talked to some other friends that had graduated, and I got hooked up with a temp job because I needed to pay rent, and I needed to eat, right? Those were the priorities of that. So hopefully you guys are way farther ahead in thinking about your priorities than I was. So I had two choices for my first job. One was to inspect hams at a food factory in a walk-in freezer. I was qualified to do that. The other one was to test soap at a cleaning chemicals factory. And the hams one paid 25 cents more an hour. So I decided to take less money and accidentally ended up with a company called Unilever. And I'm not sure if you guys know what that company is, but at that time it was the largest chemical company, consumer goods chemical company in the world. So completely by accident, I landed at the ground floor of one of the best chemical companies in the world. And making no money, but more money than I'd ever made. I'd pay rent, pay my car insurance, I was able to watch a movie time to time. It got a lot better quick, right? And part of this is an accidental journey, and I'll say if you're more intentional than me, you're going to be even farther ahead. But the accidental journey will work too. The getting started piece is a valuable thing. So, landed in fertile ground, right, and was able to use my talents, my personality, my education, and was able to advance very quickly because that company had an eye for talent. And thankfully, they viewed me as someone with talent. So in those years, I was able to do a new job every year. Okay? And those experiences going from quality assurance to manufacturing supervision to transportation logistics to planning to a whole litany of things that created base knowledge for me as I grew in the industry. Okay? And my broad education here made those things less scary, right? I was used to learning different things that were not related to my core knowledge. It became less intimidating every new thing I had to learn. So you kind of think about, okay, why are they making me take X, Y, and Z? Why are they making me take this? That liberal arts education really does have value because you're required to learn about things that are unadjacent to the things that you're focused on. And as you start your career, some of you will be very focused on specific things, whether it's medicine, whether it's research, whether it's pharma. You probably won't be doing that forever. Other things, other adjacent things that you'll have to learn about. I didn't find out what I was really good at until I was 10 years old. And I didn't know that job even existed when I was in college. So I had the opportunity to learn about procurement, which is the buying of things needed, right? So global chemicals, I was able to then work across the world supporting the company that I was with to buy all the raw materials, do the deals, do the bids, get those supply relationships. And for me, it was like once you find that area where you're running fast and it's not much effort, but it's like that best match of it just all makes sense and I'm really good at it. Once once you find that piece, you need to run as hard as you can because you found kind of your niche on that. So that's proven to be a positive thing for me. I was able to advance throughout my career. It's a great opportunity to work for some great companies. Most of the time was because the company I was with got bought by somebody else, but that's a different story for another time. So I've had 19 different jobs in 28 years, but I've really only worked for 3 companies. I just got bought a bunch of times. And every time you get bought, it's like entering a new high school. You know, new players, new things, new company, stuff like that. So what I do now, Chief Supply Chain Officer for Highline Warren. So what that means to you is we make Rain-X, we make Mobile One filters, Prime Guard. We're the largest manufacturer of mobile oil, of car lubricants in the US. It's very basic. Right? Prior to that, I worked in chemicals, worked for a company called Steppen, which you guys all went through COVID, right? Who could get a Clorox wipe in COVID? They were barely available. So one of the divisions of Steppen, we made the active ingredient for Clorox wipes, right? In addition to every other quaternary disinfectant in the U.S. We're the largest manufacturer in the world of that. And demand went up 3,000% in a day. So that was an invention. So you kind of think about, okay, my degree in biology, understanding microbiology, things like that. You know, are there other actives, are there other things that we can use to supplement that? We launched new lines that were part of that story, but you know, the reason we started using a whole bunch of other disinfectants, the reason why everything smells like IPA, the reason why there's way more bleach used now, is because I couldn't keep the world supplied with enough quaternary disinfectant for normal hard surface disinfection. So I'll take the blame for that one. That one's on me. And then, you know, through that, I've been able to work for some great companies in the world and learned a lot of things. Now let's get relevant for you guys. So that's my story. One of the things I talked about yesterday with the business students, and it's a different group, is don't think about what you want to be, think about who you are, right? So my job enables me to do the things and be the person that I want to be, right? So as you think about your vision for the future, right? And at this point in your life, you're thinking about, I'm going to be a doctor, I'm going to be a nurse, I'm going to be an occupational therapist, I'm going to be a professor, right? That's great, right? But more importantly is 10, 15 years in the future, who do you want to be, right? What does a successful life look like to you in your mind's eye, right? And if the answer is, I'm going to be a professor of biology, then you may not be a happy person, because the things that probably, or I'm going to be a chief supply chain officer, that's a job, right? And even a dream job is just a job. My good friend, he's the linebackers coach at Buffalo Bills. It's his dream job. It is a hard job every day. He achieved his dream vocationally, right? But even your dream job is hard. It's going to have bad days. It's going to have frustration. It's going to have all those things. But who you want to be is, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I achieve a level of financial independence. I will support the causes that I want to support. Right? I'm able to travel the world for business. I'm able to think my vision of who I wanted to be is much more important than my vision of what my job is. Your job enables that vision of who you want to be as a person. Right? So I would challenge you guys, think less about your vision for that job and keep in your mind's eye what your vision for your personal success is. Both from a personal standpoint, from a family standpoint, from a spiritual standpoint, from a mission standpoint. What do you want to be able to accomplish? Your job enables that, but it's not your job, right? If that's the only thing you're striving for, chances are you're not going to be happy, right? Just a little bit of separation on that. No one told me that, right? I figured that as I go. But for me, as I think about what insight, I always had a view of, hey, this is what I want to be when I grow up. It wasn't the job. It was all those other things in the job. Like I said, most of the jobs I've had, I know they exist. What I will say as well, we talked about the reasons I wanted to be a doctor when I came in. They were not good reasons to be a doctor, and that's mainly the reason it didn't work out. Okay? So be brutally honest with what your goals and priorities are. Why are you chasing what you're chasing? And if it's for good reasons, if it fits the vision of who you want to be, that's fantastic, right? Then that's aligned. But if who you want to be and what you're chasing is driven by different priorities, it's driven by different things, that's where that disconnect's going to happen, and the potential to be 2 years into medical school and realize, gosh, I hate this, or 3 years into an OT vocation, you're like, what am I doing here? Make sure you've got that alignment, because if you've got a disconnect between those two things, that's the hardest thing. And I'm not saying live in fear with this, right? That's not what I'm saying. Just be honest with yourself. Be clear in your vision on those things. And as tightly as those can align, the best chance you're going to have for success getting both things done. We talked about go actively research and experience your chosen profession. I cannot say it enough. Find out what people actually do in these things that you guys are chasing so hard. The work you guys are putting into these majors, no one else is doing, right? You're putting a massive amount of work into it. Understand where you're headed. And two things are going to happen. Right? We talked about this a little earlier. It's going to increase your motivation, which is awesome, right? So if you go and you actually shadow and you work with them, even do a junior job in something in the summer, right? Get lunch, volunteer, whatever in that industry or career that you're looking at. It's going to solidify that you've made the right choice, and that's going to raise your motivation even higher to get all these things done. Or, like for me, you're going to realize this isn't for me, and that is equally valuable. Okay? Now, what I will say is, it doesn't mean you have to change your major. It doesn't mean you have to do this massive pivot versus all the work you did. Okay? I realized in the middle of the journey that medicine wasn't for me. All right? And for probably all the wrong reasons, which is I didn't want to do another year or two in college, I decided let's finish off this BS in biology minor in chemistry and see where it takes me. All right? That degree enabled me to land in fertile care. Right? The reality is I don't do a lot with that knowledge today, although it gives me a base knowledge to understand a lot of things. Right? I understand how refineries work. I understand propylene. I understand how organic chemistry for me was an amazing class, and most of you guys are going to take it and hate it. For me to unlock knowledge that I use still to this day about how the world fits together and how things are made. Embrace that. Right? It's probably one of the more practical things I did, but most of you guys think like it's a visit to New Orleans. The knowledge is valuable, but just because, hey, gosh, I work with a doctor and now I'm in a business, doesn't mean this degree isn't completely suited, for growing your career. Just make sure we're good on time here. What's my?
You're good.
Okay. I want to leave like
20
10
minutes.
Okay, great. I'll finish off here. So, one thing I will say is the biggest gap that I had, and I'll talk a little bit about this again, because many of you in this room are going to be very successful in whatever you do, right? I'm not trying to be that person. Some of the best and brightest people I've known in my life sat with me in that pain science, And I've worked all around the world. I've been colleagues with people that have been to PhDs. They've got MBAs from Northwestern and Harvard and other places. At no point did I look at my education and say, I don't measure it. Okay, I'll look right in the eye. At no point. Now, the one gap that I say I did have is I didn't know anything about it coming in. And the one education thing that I would say is a surprising amount of you are going to be in business, right? So if you're a doctor, you've been running an office, right? You're going to have profit and loss statement, you're going to have to handle inventory, your employees, even that, you're running a business, right? You're going to be an OT. At some point, you're probably going to be an OT manager, or you're going to be a director of a treatment center, things like that. Your knowledge of all, of financial things, if you can get a little bit of that, I'm not saying it has to be formal education, right? use YouTube, use Khan Academy, use whatever. I came out, joined business, probably one of the brightest people in the building, and I did not speak a word of the language that building ran. Okay? They're talking about P&Ls, they're talking about credits and debits, they're talking about EBITDA, they're talking about all these things. And I could talk about the Greenyard reagent, I could talk about, Petri dishes, I could procreate, all those things, right? I could hit the frog, I could do whatever. But how business actually ran didn't own that language. Okay? And as you guys grow in your careers and you're successful in things, what I can say is the better you speak that language, right? The language of finance. It sounds odd talking science students. That's the lens, that's the prism that almost all decisions get made with, right? Even in academia, right? We gotta be able to fund the budget, we gotta have the students in it, we gotta be able to know how much things we gotta buy. Like there's a part of the world that likely your eyes are not open to, that is running a language that you guys don't understand. And I can say that because I don't understand it at all. And thankfully I had some great team members and mentors along the way that opened my eyes to, okay, you need to understand this. And the other thing I'll say on it is, if you think about the mission, right, what you view as important, whether it's, hey, I'm gonna be a doctor so that I can, support medical missionaries, around the world or in the inner cities or something like that. Hey, I'm gonna, put my times and talents towards, human trafficking or whatever it is. Many in this room are gonna be working jobs and having careers that may take massive amounts of time. And the reality is, you guys may be more supporting those missions with your resources than your time and talents. So learning about how to be the best steward for those resources that you create, really important. That's a mission critical. Because if you're in a top job at, say, a pharmaceutical company, you're not going to have 2 weeks to go over to, Jamaica and help with hurricane, right? That's not going to happen. You're going to write a check, right? And then you're going to go back to work and decide where your, resources go. So understand that piece. Learn that language. No matter what you do, most of you are going to be in business. It's important to learn that language. And just keep your eyes open, right? Some of the best and brightest. You're going to have opportunities that may not feel like they're the right fit for you. Like, hey, I studied biology or I studied chemistry. What do I know about supply chain? What do I know about marketing? What I would say is you've got a broad education base, and most importantly, you know how to work, you know how to solve problems, you know how to figure things out. And most of you aren't afraid to ask for help because you have your hard things. And as you enter the world, you're going to need to ask for help from a lot of people, right? Incorporate that in and solve problems. So that to me is, if you think about opening your aperture for other opportunities, take advantage of all these events that you've had, the ways to learn, the ways to solve problems, and you're going to be surprised how successful. I want to leave a little bit of time for questions. I gave away a bunch of marketing swag yesterday, so I got a little bit of marketing swag for today. So first 3 questions get an air tag. So any questions at this point? Most of the business students have a lot more interest in this. Please.
You mentioned that
What I'm saying on that is, like, I've been fortunate to be successful in business, right? So we have a charitable trust. We decide where those resources go. So my wife and I decide where we send our money, right? So one of the things that we do is we support a women's shelter in Waxhaw, North Carolina, right? So there's different ways to support a mission, right? So I don't have time. My ability to support that mission at this point is much more financial than boots on the ground. Now, when I retire, when things change on that, when my resources shift to less about that and more about where I want to be personally involved physically, that may change, right? But when I talk about, there's different ways to support it. Nothing runs None of those things run without resources. And part of the mission is, maybe you're the people that help fund the mission versus do the mission. Okay?
How would you recommend, for those of us who may not necessarily have connections in the industry we're interested in, going about like getting an internship or?
Great question. Had the question yesterday from a young lady in Hannah, I don't know the last name. The resources available to you guys can think of. Light years better than what I had back in the day. The number one tool for networking is LinkedIn. If you are not active on LinkedIn, get active, right? If you're not, I can be your first connection, which is a pretty good thing, all right? And then from there, you connect with the connections of your connections, right? Same as all the other social media, but it's professional, right? So don't post goofy stuff on there, don't do anything like that. This is your best version of yourself. And those opportunities will start coming. You have to have the initiative to go out there and make those connections. That is the number one thing to do. So don't do it, don't come in fear, don't be awkward about it. It's like, hey, I want to connect. Here's what I'm interested in. Anybody, maybe it's something, maybe it's, hey, I want to be in upstate New York. If you have a connection in upstate New York or in Buffalo, where I can do some, an internship with someone. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. You get into somebody else, right? So work those networks. That is the number one thing. That is what gets it done. Okay? So it sounds simple. Use it, work it. Also use your professors and their connections. You may have a parent, or a friend with a parent that's in the industry. Don't be ashamed to use that. People will want to help you, particularly, as you're entering your career. Because we've all been there, right? We've all had that. All right, this is the last one. Everybody gets asked questions, but I only ask one this slide.
I was just wondering, if you knew that you were going to end up with a different job, would you still have continued on with that major, or do you feel like the process was important to figure that out?
It's a great question, right? So hindsight's 20/20 kind of thing. Hard to say. I mean, that's really. I would say, if I had known I was going to be in this industry, I absolutely would have continued my education, right? Sort of general industry, maybe I would have changed, but if I had general industry, I wouldn't have landed there, right? I wouldn't have landed in the chemical industry, right? Because chances are at that point, I wouldn't have been qualified for that first job, right? And doing something completely different. So what I would say is, really be honest with yourself about what you want to do, where you want to land, and think about the quality of education you're getting, right? So, if I'd switched to business, it would have been a different path, but I'd say this one worked out for me on that, and part of it is because it was hard. Part of it was the things I was learning as well. So, I would just say, measure where you want to be, and what you want to do, and changing your major. At the end of the day, it's a big decision. It's not the biggest decision you're going to make. Okay. So make the call and run with it, whatever it is. That's what I would say. But be intentional about it. Right? This isn't something to change your mind. But great question. Fair question. Anything else? Good. Fair enough. All right. Good. No. So thank you guys for your time and attention. Like I said, it's probably covered. Sure.
Yesterday, I thought one of the most valuable things you shared with the students was the idea of what it looks like to be a servant in the workplace, almost in a selfish manner.
Yeah.
Because what you could glean from the experts and the mentors and what that looks like in that word of encouragement that you gave the students yesterday, I thought was awesome. Yeah.
So real quick on that, I know you guys got to run a class. So my focus yesterday for the business students was more about getting started. They know what they want to do, right? They want to go out and enter the workforce and start those first jobs. And for me, what I'd say, if you think about taking your talents, your personality, and moving into a new phase of your life, One of the key things I told people was, you're not going to be really useful right away. So find out where you can be useful in whatever capacity possible. Right? So, when I first started, didn't know anything. What I was able to do is I took the lunch away, right? And I started making connections with a lot of people at the company, right? I was getting lunch for myself, I get it for other people. And it started building relationships. So when things went wrong, people had my back. When opportunities presented themselves, I was being talked about. So obviously, as I got better, I was able to add more value, help people in the things they were doing, build those relationships. And by doing that, by understanding what was important to my colleagues, understanding what was important to the company, and filling those gaps, even if it was jobs that I probably should have been doing, or tasks I probably should have been doing, I showed to be a team player. I showed to be willing to do the hard stuff. And that gave me opportunities to be talked about in rooms that I wasn't. Okay? So as you think about, as you enter the workforce, you enter your profession, those kind of servant activities, those kind of things. And for me, it was, did I know I was making good connections? Sure, that was good. But I was also helping people. I was also filling in gaps. I was also doing things, going where I was needed, to provide support to the company and other individuals. That builds upon itself. It gives you a reputation as someone that's willing to do, the dirty work. Someone that's willing to fill in where it's needed. And, for me, it also gave me a reputation of problem solving, right? Hey, if something's broken, is this person willing to go roll up their sleeves and figure it out, right? And those are kind of things you think about, kind of who you are as a student, who you are as a Christian, who you are as a person. Those kind of attributes and whatever you're doing, let those shine through, right? Let those be part of your identity, whether it's an industry or wherever it is. And you'll be surprised, maybe you won't be, but you'll probably be surprised have a positive impact that makes both for your coworkers, your community, but also for yourself and your career, because it helps build your reputation of being that kind of person. That's.
All right.
Thank you.
Join me in thanking the speaker for sharing his thoughts and his